I don't know who's supposed to start because you're supposed to be the host, but I'm the one asking you questions today, Leighton.
Well, let's start with a little background. All right. This all came about as a result of the conference that I put on, which was back in 18, 19, and 20. And one of the things that I talk about or I spoke on was soil. What is it, right? And that's something that I think is the foundation of the horizontal soil system. Is that what is clay, what is silt, what is sand? So let's start with clay. A lot of people hate clay, especially people that live, like in Southern California with our high clay soils. They're very difficult to work with once they've become compacted. And the reason why is I want you to visualize a clay platelet looking very similar to a flying saucer. And you know what I should have done was gotten a whiteboard or something so I could draw it. But I think people have a good enough imagination. But think of it as a very, very thin platelet. And so, or thin flying saucer. So it's not very tall in the middle, like, some people visualize these flying discs. It's very thin. And it has what we call negative or positive charges around the outside edge of that circle. We assume it's like 100 parking spots, okay, where because it's magnetically charged, it can attract cations, which is some of your most important macronutrients, which is calcium, magnesium, and potassium, but also salt, and also there are some trace minerals that have a slight charge, positive or negative charge. So what happens when that clay platelet is in a healthy soil system? It stacks up because the outer rim is negatively or positively charged, and the center, top and bottom of that disc are negatively charged. So the clay platelet would stand, and then another one would stand on top of it because of those charges. During compaction, they're like this. And in most cases, overlaying, which makes it even more complicated. So if you draw 4 circles on a piece of paper, and then where those 4 circles, because they're solid, they can't really overlap. They butt into each other. But in the center of those 4 circles, the next platelet stacks on top of it. Now, how are you ever going to get that to unstack? And the only way you can is through biological properties. The biology have to get in there and start building biofilms underneath that center platelet to kind of jack it up. And eventually, over time, in a healthy soil system, especially when you have organic matter, dissolved organic matter working down in there, that helps to feed those bacteria. And they multiply like crazy and really push that thing up. Well, eventually it gets to a point where it's so far up and it probably starts to tip that, boom, now it's attached. So you have that positive and negative charge working together to create a column. And it just keeps going up and up and up. And what happens between the upright and the flat ones is you have like a channel, a C channel. And basically the bacteria get in there and create those biofilms. And now you've got a solid column. So it's not easily compacted. Now, when you start to use synthetic fertilizers, what happens is that column collapses, or when you till, it collapses because you've knocked the thing over in scale. This is why, regenerative farming is all about no tilling and obviously no synthetic fertilizers, because that ruins tilth. We call, when you can stick your hands down in the soil, we call that tilth. And as a matter of fact, Kyle Moot, who's going to be coming on sometime soon, he's in the process of getting some tests done both on the soil biology through Andy Marsh, but also a company called Nestle's Dublin, who does nutritional testing for food. And we're going to be able to compare it against a synthetically grown corn. So that's going to be really interesting. But after 3 years of using dissolved organic matter, so compost extracts, fish brew, and all non-synthetic fertilizers like fish hydrolysate, and he did some trace minerals a couple of times, and he has a few other like seaweed extracts or kelp meals. Now he has tilth, whereas before when I first started working with him, you couldn't get your finger down even a quarter inch into the soil. It was just we
Yeah.
call. And now you can just bury your hand in there. And when I asked him, well, how does it feel? He goes, it feels great, and there's worms and everything else. So this is what happens. It does take time on commercial scale, and he doesn't deep till. He does a light disking in the spring, just to get some opening for the corn seed to drop in the but for the most part, he no longer, really tills like most commercial farms do. But after 3 years of synthetic free, he's got tilth. And so we know that during that, those clay platelets are standing up and stacking up. And now, anytime it rains, that water's going down into the soil and filling up those aggregates like little sponges. So it really is the key, both to fertility, because those clay platelets hold on to those nutrients. They're not allowed to wash away. They're not mobile. And the only way they can come off those clay platelets is through biological forces like bacteria or root exudates leaking in the area of the clay platelet. And that's when the plant can really take control of the bank account, so to say.
Yeah.
So imagine you had 100 places around the outside edge of that. And obviously you have 2 places on the top and bottom, which will attract anions. And so, say, in an ideal world, one of the things I do when I do testing is I look at for a saturated paste test, and I look for the percentage. And ideal percentage is 70-75% calcium, 18 to 20% magnesium, and 8 to 10 parts potassium. And now the plant can literally regulate. It has the ability to use calcium, because calcium is mobile in the plant, to knock off any salts. So again, just really building the whole biological system by allowing the plant to control and regulate what it uptakes. And of course, the bacteria are mining the minerals out of that clay. We all know, or maybe I should get into clay a little bit more. It's like, how is it formed? Well, typical soil science says that clay, sand, and silt are all based on particle size, which I disagree with, because
Right.
they all have different properties. Typically, sand is inert, although there are cases like, everything in nature, there is always, outliers or outlanders or exceptions to the rule. But clay is always magnetic, and silt is generally negatively charged. So, here we got these positive and negative forces working together with each other to help, once that soil is healthy, to function as a, drains, retains water, nutrient cycling, all the benefits, like i.e. in a meadow or a great prairie or a forest. Nobody's doing anything, and you don't see erosion. You don't see, the only time you see plants dying or shedding is due to seasonal causes. And let's face it, there's things in nature that are selected to die to make room for the next generation or the next succession of that soil system.
Yeah.
So there is always that going on as well. But the clay is generally formed through glaciers grinding rock against rock. And that's why you see that clay colored water, especially like in disturbed areas, for gold mining or other man-made activities. The water gets very cloudy very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
That's the clay, because the clay is so small that it stays suspended. And as a matter of fact, I've talked about this before, but one of the greatest studies that I came across a number of years ago was in Egypt. They had the deltas, some of the most fertile croplands, in Africa, and they started to lose fertility. And year after year, everything got worse and worse and worse. So the Ministry of Agriculture was called in to diagnose, like, why are we struggling, in this most fertile of soils? in Africa. Why are we going backwards? And so after a lot of research and water quality tests, what they realized was that in the spring floods, they weren't getting what was called nanoclay. I didn't even know nanoclay existed until that point. So that's like a clay platelet that's even smaller than what we would typically see or determine as.
Would that be classed as a silt?
No, silt is organic matter, and we'll get into silt in a minute.